Shalom, friends. I'm honored to be joined today by Doug Seserman, who is the CEO of Americans for Ben-Gurion University. Doug has a very important mission to help revive and advance Zionism, and today we're going to talk about some of the challenges facing Zionism in the 21st century, as well as the Americans for Ben-Gurion University movement. Doug, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alex. Pleasure to be here. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. So, to start, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to become Americans for Ben-Gurion University CEO?
Sure. It's not a job that I grew up thinking I was going to do for sure, but at the end of the day, I'm my mother's son, and I think I was destined to do this job. But I grew up on the East Coast, was born on the East Coast, lived there for a little bit, and then my father was not a serial entrepreneur and moved us west. Eventually was really raised in Denver, Colorado. But as a proud Jew and Zionist, and did everything that I was supposed to do, Hebrew school, Jewish summer camps, very active in youth group. Eventually, I was a leader in the BBYO movement, if you're familiar with that. Went to Camp Ramah, and then I went to Northwestern, and I met my wife there. I told her I was on sent there by my AZA youth group to make sure the Jewish girls married Jewish guys, and that was my line. It didn't work initially, but eventually I wore her down, and we've been married now for 33 years. Professionally, when I got out of Northwestern's business school, I went to work for the Quaker Oats Company in packaged goods brand management. That led me to change my career to the cable television industry. I was at one point the senior marketing person for TCI Communications, which got acquired by AT&T. And after my company got acquired, I wanted to find more purpose in my life. And I ended up taking a job with the Jewish Federation in Denver, Colorado as their CEO. And I thought I would do it for 3 to 5 years. If I had lived in Israel, I would have had to serve in the IDF, but because I was raised in this country, I never really had to serve my people in the same way. So I thought if I could marry my vocation and avocation, that would be terrific. But I ended up doing it for 15 and a half years, and it became my, purpose, I think, in terms of career. So through the Jewish Federation in Colorado, we had a partnership in the Negev, and I would spend a lot of time in Israel traveling, especially with members of the state legislature on the left and also on the right. And I became very familiar with the arguments for both sides. And then Colorado passed the fourth anti-BDS resolution, and fourth state in the country to do that. I testified twice at the state legislature for that initiative, and in part because I think I became pretty familiar with the arguments, and was seen by both sides as somebody who could advocate for Israel, but wasn't necessarily partisan. But when you're in the Negev, you start to run into two things: David Ben-Gurion, who's buried there at Sde Boker, and you also run into Ben-Gurion University. And I became convinced that Ben-Gurion really had the right ideas for the Jewish state, the Jewish people, our role in the world, Israel's role, and that the key to the future of the country was to drive it south. And the best way to do that was to really support Ben-Gurion University of the Negev for all its impact it has, not only with its students, but also with the region, through its education and research and all the programming that it does as the Negev's largest employer. So when this job opened up in New York in 2017, I gladly put my name as a candidate, because I think in many ways people don't realize that Ben-Gurion University is really, if not it's one of the most vital institutions for the future of Israel. And then here in the States, given all the challenges, we call it a movement, because in many ways the university, the Migdalor, it's like a beacon of light that represents all the good things of modern Israel in a part of the country that is uncontested, that everybody can rally around. So maybe I'll stop there. I know I've been talking for a long time.
No problem. Thank you. I relate a lot to your story. I actually did a international study trip to Ben-Gurion University when I was in college. It was a beautiful campus and really impressive.
Where did you go to school?
At the University of Manitoba in Canada.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So could you also sort of tell us, how would you define 21st century Zionism?
Wow, that's a great question, right? It's something that really needs to be designed. So the way I would think about it is, let's just put it in context. So Zionism, and Israel is the only country I think in the world that's not even 100 years old. It's 70 years old. 73.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, 1948. So yeah, it was 74. Because we're coming up on the 75th.
Right.
Exactly. So Israel is the only country in the world that's 75 years old and spans 3 centuries. And because Zionism is really a 19th century concept, that's Theodor Herzl, basically coming to the conclusion that there needs to be a Jewish homeland in its ancient land because there's so much persecution and anti-Semitism in the world. Without Theodor Herzl, there is no Israel that we know today. And then in the 20th, and I would call that Israel should exist. That's 19th century Zionism. Israel should exist. 20th century Zionism is Israel needs to exist. And this is really David Ben-Gurion following in Herzl's footsteps, but paving the way for the modern state. And Ben-Gurion makes his Aliyah when he's 20 years old in 1906 from Plunsk. And he's working to build the state before World War I, but between World War I and World War II, when you have pre-state Palestine under the British mandate, David Ben-Gurion's leading the effort to create the Jewish state in its ancient homeland. Unfortunately, as we know, we have World War II and the Holocaust. And that really proves, I think, to the world that Israel needs to exist as a defense strategy, in a way that never again, if Israel had existed at the time of World War II, there probably is no Holocaust. So 20th century Zionism is Israel needs to exist because the Jews, unfortunately, can be a persecuted people, and anti-Semitism, as we know today, that isn't going anywhere. The 21st century Zionism, I think, is something like Israel has earned its right to exist, meaning Israel is a positive contributor to the world. So 20th century Zionism is a defensive construct, meaning Israel needs to exist because Jews are persecuted and there's anti-Semitism. We're coming out of the Holocaust. 21st century Zionism is offensive in that the Jewish state has proved itself and is a contributor to the world in education, especially through science and contributions and medical breakthroughs and cybersecurity and everything, especially climate related things that we're really good at Ben-Gurion University. Necessity is the mother of invention, but we're world leaders in water research and everything that's known today as climate technology. We just introduced Israel's first and largest school of sustainability and climate change. People think it's like this breakthrough idea, but in Israel, they've been doing it for a long time because you're living in a desert. And in order to make the desert bloom, you had to use the Jewish brain to create science that could, as Ben-Gurion said, bring food from the sands, water from the air, and power energy from the sun. And so we've been leaders in desalination and water research, water reuse, and drip irrigation, everything Israel is great at. So I think 21st century Zionism is really about leveraging the positive contributions that many don't really understand emanate from Israel, and to get support around these things that especially young people can identify with in terms of their universal values. This is an interesting statistic, and then I'll end there. You can ask another question, but there was an interesting study done by Jewish American voters about a year and a half ago, and it showed that 4% of Jewish American voters were interested in Biden's policies on Israel, but 32% of Jewish American voters were interested in Biden's policy on the climate. So the average Jewish American is 8 times more interested in climate than they are actually in Israel.
Right.
So 21st century Zionism, I think, in a way, is to tap into the universal values that are shared by Jews and non-Jews and connect them to breakthrough scientific world contributing efforts coming out of Israel. That would be how I would think about 21st century Zionism. It's about the positive contributions today in an offensive way, not a defensive, we have to exist because we're a persecuted people.
Right, very interesting. So we touched on this a little bit, but could you tell us a bit more about what Americans for Ben-Gurion University's movement is all about?
Sure. Happy to do that. Thanks so much. I'll try to be brief, although that's not my
No worries.
expertise. So let's start with the university does three things, and we do three things in support of the university. So the university does three things. It does education, it does research, and it's the only university in Israel that has a mandate to develop a region. Its region is the Negev Desert. So there are 20,000 students, most of them Israeli, but about 1,000 or 5% of our student body is international students from all over the world that study mostly graduate work in English. We also have about 2,000 Arab Israeli students. There's great diversity on our campus. So 20,000 students, 2/3 of them undergrad, 1/3 graduate. We do breakthrough research in all kinds of areas. I was just talking about desert research and desert science through our Blaustein Institutes of Desert Research and the new School of Sustainability and Climate Change that leverages our three campuses in Beersheba, Sde Boker, and Eilat. We actually have incredible marine biology happening in Eilat right there on the border with the Red Sea. We have a professor named Nadav Shashar. I call him the Jacques Cousteau of Israel. He's developed 3D printed coral reef that fish prefer as a marine habitat to regular reef. It's an incredible technology, could be world changing. And then we're great in cybersecurity, robotics. We're an engineering powerhouse. A lot of the things that Israel's great known as today as Startup Nation emanates strongly from many universities, but out of BGU. We call our main campus in Beersheba an innovation ecosystem. It's really an amazing place to visit. If you haven't visited Israel recently, you need to go spend some time in the Negev, and you don't really understand the Negev until you spend time at Ben-Gurion University. But our campus today, our campus is in Orange. You have Soroka Hospital across the street from our main campus. Our main campus is in the process of doubling its footprint because we're the fastest growing research university in Israel. Then we have an advanced technology park adjacent to our campus near the train station. You can take a high-speed train today from Beersheba. It takes about an hour to get to Tel Aviv. And then the IDF's movement south, people don't realize, but the largest infrastructure investment in the history of the state of Israel is happening now, which is the IDF moving south. And we have the elite communications, I call them 22nd century cyber soldiers that will be co-located within a few years, probably close to 5,000 soldiers. And they're also students, right? Because there's compulsory military service in Israel. So if you sign up for an elite unit like this elite unit in communications and IT, you also get your degree at Ben-Gurion University at the same time. Same thing with the Israeli Air Force. So we are a university that educates, does science, research, and also develops the region. I'm going to change the background for a second and just show a map of Israel. The Negev is the southern part of Israel. Beersheba is really the gateway to the Negev. And our three campuses are in Beersheba, Sde Boker, and Eilat. The Negev represents 60% of the land of Israel, but still less than 10% of the population. And if you fold this map in half, you'll see that Beersheba is actually at the geographic center of the country, but it still exists a little bit in the psychological periphery, if you will. Many people that travel to Israel or even live in Israel think of the Negev maybe in an old construct as opposed to a contemporary construct that I was just showing you with our innovation ecosystem. Today, Beersheba is really one of the fastest growing cities in Israel and startup nation on steroids. So the university had this role to develop a region. I call it the Stanford effect sometimes. If you take Stanford out of Palo Alto, you have a nice place to live between San Francisco and San Jose. But with Stanford, you create Silicon Valley. Same thing with BGU. We call it jokingly Silicon Wadi, a dry riverbed. But at the end of the day, we're the Negev's largest employer and the source of the vast majority of innovation that will lead to new companies that provide employment, jobs, prosperity, and the ability for a region to grow. What we do at Americans for Ben-Gurion University is also three things. So what we do is we raise awareness, first for David Ben-Gurion and his ideas. You know, unfortunately, people still think of David Ben-Gurion a little bit as the old man. Now they know that he's when pushed, that he's the first prime minister and founder of the state, and the name on our university, but they've lost his ideas in time. So what we do is we raise awareness. We call ourselves Americans for Ben-Gurion University. In many ways, it's Americans, Jews and non-Jews, for Ben-Gurion, his ideas, the Jewish people, the Jewish state, and the university that carries his name. And our tagline is being partners in the remarkable. So we see ourselves living in the diaspora as partners in the modern Jewish state via the university, which does a remarkable work that represents some of the best of Israel. So we raise awareness for this idea for him and also for the university. The second thing we do is we raise resources. And the majority of philanthropic support to the university comes from the United States. We're proud to raise on an annual basis 60 to 70% of the philanthropy that supports student scholarships, laboratories, professor chairs, all the capital projects that need to be built. I was mentioning we're doubling the footprint. So we have a lot of buildings to construct. And then finally, we run programs. One of our most well-known programs is called Zin Fellows. It's a leadership program open to American young people that helps them kind of become immersed and engaged in the Negev and in BGU in a way that other leadership programs don't run. So that's what we do. We raise awareness, we raise financial resources, and we run programs.
That's great. So just before we sort of wrap up, is there anywhere that you'd like to mention that people could go if they want to learn more or get involved with like the leadership program you mentioned or anything like that?
Sure. So the best source is our website for all things Americans for BGU, and that's its website, right? So just
Great.
fill out www, but Americans for BGU.org is our website. And we have chapters all over the country, that some that have been there for a while and some that are in formation. And we're always bringing our scientists. They travel throughout the US, and we call our work today live in, fly in, zoom in. We love to partner with other organizations, congregations, JCCs, federations, any organization that's looking for positive Israel content. We think of our content as being part of any pro-Israel's organization's product. So sometimes in the Jewish world, the organizations don't partner that well because people are concerned about donors going from one place to another. We actually pride ourselves in our ability to collaborate and partner with other organizations because we just think we represent some of the best content in modern Israel and a part of the country that the Negev that many people are not familiar with. So I think the best way to get involved with us, check out the website, and you can learn more there. And you can also email me anytime. My email is Doug, D-O-U-G, at americansforbgu.org. I'd love to connect, and thank you so much, Alix, for having us on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. All right, it was great to speak with you.
Sure, thank you.
Take care.